Hello everybody, welcome to the Matuska Taxidermy Supply Company, our live presentation, and if you've been following along, we're still working on a cape, and when we start working on a cape, we're pretty diligent at it and keep going. And we were lucky enough to go out fishing today, didn't we?
You say lucky.
We were lucky enough to go out. We weren't lucky enough to catch fish. It was cold. It was so beautiful here at the studio and supply company. And when we went out, it was nippy.
It was cold.
When it's so cold, I mean, it was nice in town, and it was so cold that your eyelets freeze. That's how cold it was.
Yes, it was.
Anyway, our fishing trip, we're going to have a really fun presentation and show you how to take care of a trophy and observations and color notes and all kinds of things when it comes to fish collecting, but not today.
Not this week.
We got to get practiced up a little bit.
Maiden voyage for the new boat for this year.
I know. Well, if you've been following along, we have started with a cape, and that will eventually mount, and just showing you, many of you want to start tanning your own capes, hides, leather, it's not rocket science. Anybody can do it. There is a system that you have to follow. Get in a regiment. If something works, don't vary from that strategy, stay with what works. When you start experimenting and hanging them a different way or soaking them a different way or all different kinds of things that you can change in the process, your results are going to change also. And that's where things can go south in a hurry. So we've tanned hides, for 30 years probably. And to start with, I've got horror stories. I mean, like real horror stories when I first started. That's why we tell you, if you're going to tan your own hide, practice with something that you can afford to lose, because there is a lot of chemistry that goes into this, and things can go wrong when you don't understand fully what you're doing. So we have a cape, and if you look back in our archives in the previous sessions that we have done, try to follow what we do to the letter. If you want to experiment, you're going to expect different results. Almost every time, if you change temperature of the water, you're going to get different results. If you change the amount of tan, you're going to get different results. If you change how you flesh or when you flesh, a lot of people like to skin the deer and tan it and do all the fleshing afterwards. That hide is not protected after it's tanned as good as it is in the pickle. Once it's in the acid pickle, we brought this up before, the aoudad out in the showroom was in the pickle for years and still looks very, very good. Had we tanned it and then decided to flesh it, you don't have that kind of working time. So there is a definite orderly method to tanning your own hides. And once something works, keep a good log. Keep detailed notes, when you started, when you stopped, what was the temperature that day, how long did you leave it in the different baths, like the neutralizer, in which we haven't got to yet, but in your tan. Keep really accurate records, and it'll help you pinpoint any trouble areas. And we've been tanning for 30 years probably. You not.
Almost.
Because you're still a youngster. But we didn't start out with successes, and some of you aren't going to start out, with successful tans either. So make sure, there's so many variables. How thick your skin is. How did you handle it? How did the hunter handle it? So keep very detailed records on this, and pretty soon you're going to know right from wrong, good from bad, right off the bat.
And speaking of keeping records too, I've noticed that it's real easy to write down all of your successes in your notes, but keep track of the things that didn't work too.
Those
just
are
to
more
look
valuable.
back on, they really
Those are more valuable.
Yep.
Show them what we've done so far. Now, I think when we left you, we had taken the ear cartilage out, we had thinned the face, we had thinned all the different areas. I like to get as much fleshing done because he's much safer now. Remember this, he's much safer now in a pickled state than he is in a tanned state. We have found that tanned hides do not have the working time that a pickled hide does.
Yeah.
So now is the time to work a little harder on your fleshing, you know, spend a little more time here, split your ears to the edges, and do all the detail work so you don't have to do it in a tan state.
And I don't know who said it first, but I remember you saying it the first time I heard it, and that was thin to win.
Thin to win. It's always thin to win.
That's what we've done with this entire cape from the surface of the nose all the way through the entire animal. Don't neglect any area. A lot of times if you see something in a finished mount that has shrunk, you can take that back to your fleshing. And antler bases are one of those areas that we want to make sure that are nice and thin. So we've gone around the antler bases. We'll go one more time around the seam. We'll show you that. We've taken the cartilage out of the ears. You mentioned last week the importance of the ear bases, thinning the ear bases. So we've gone all the way around those. Tear ducts here, eyelids, all of that tuck skin has been trimmed and shortened up all through the face, and then through the body. You even mentioned last week you can kind of tell just how thin it is by how supple and how easily it moves. And now in the pickled state, it's probably stiffer than it will be when we neutralize. When we neutralize, this will lay down like a piece of paper. So
tanning is very, very important, whether you do it yourself or whether you are hiring a commercial tannery to do it. A good tan, you want stretch. You don't want that hide drying and shrinking and pulling your stitches away. And it doesn't take a whole lot of observation to look at a mounted deer head, and right away there may be things that jump out at you. Like one thing I always look at, you always look at the seam. You know, everybody wants to look at seams, whether it's a life-size animal or a deer head, especially people that aren't taxidermists. They want to see how it was put together. So they look at the back of the neck, and if it looks like there's a seam there, you know, they go, aha, that's how they did that. You know, or up the back of the legs. A good taxidermist that has properly thinned his skin and it's proper tan, that won't show. They won't be able to find it. It's going to take neater stitches. That person also has to take nice, neat stitches. But the secret to that is thin skin, a good tan, not over tightened, and you will have a really, you know, nice seam. Nice seams are important. When people look at, especially non-taxidermists, look at your seams or where they assume there should be a seam, and they go, I expected that. You know, they expected that there. If they can't find it, you did an exceptional job. So that's what we want. Thick leather. Just think of your shoes. Walk out in a mud puddle, come in, the next time, and your shoes dry, next time you try to put your shoes on, they don't go on so good. And they're tight, and they have to be worked to make them fit. So it's nothing different with what we're working on now. We're turning this into leather, and thin doesn't have the power to distort like thick skin does. So we have pretty much, other than repairs, we have repairs to do, but this is all, you know, nice and thin. And like Brett was mentioning earlier, how thin it is around antlers. For a couple of my years when I first started doing taxidermy work, I would mount the deer and all of a sudden it would shrink away from the antler burr. And I blamed it on all kinds of things except myself, of course. But the reason was I never thinned this skin thin enough around the antler burr. Thick skin has a tremendous amount of power, and you can pin it all you want, and it's going to bend the pins, it's going to move the pins. Leather, as it dries, is very, very powerful. By thinning this, which it took me 2-3 years, I patched them. I used to have, I think I told you last week, I used to have extra capes that I would cut little crescents around here and glue in around my antler burrs, just because I wasn't quite smart enough yet to thin around, you know, where the antlers go. Same with the eyes. If you've done taxidermy work before, or you continually have problems with your eyes opening up or distorting, check the thickness of the eyes. Are your tear ducts always pulling out? Check the thickness of your tear duct. This should be very, very, almost as thin as a latex glove. Really, really thin. Lips. Do your lips look, you know, kind of wrinkly, want to pull out? Your lips should be extremely, extremely thin. And I think we showed you we have a little apron of skin on the eye. That's going to help us tuck that eye. This ear butt, we spend a lot of time. When we mount a deer, we'll show you how to mount a deer, and we kind of build up all the muscles on that ear base, the actual muscles that control the ear. If you have thick skin down in this ear butt area, it's going to drum right over your muscles, and all that pretty clay work and all the muscles that you laid in there, which a deer has in real life, isn't going to show, because that's going to drum right across. Seams, we don't want to use a pliers when we sew up a deer, so we want our seam edges nice and thin, but also nice and thin back here also. But if you're using a pliers to sew up your deer, your seams aren't thin enough.
Yeah.
We want to be able to sew them effortlessly with a 3-cornered needle and just, you know, sew them easily. If you're forcing them through with the pliers, I bet you your stitches are going to pull right apart. So there's a whole lot of, I don't want to say tricks, but just routines to get into to make sure that you're not going to have trouble with your hide later on. And the whole deer has been thinned on the machine. What did you do? Maybe 3 times?
I'd say 3, yeah.
I always say my first time is not count. I guess I'd say 4, counting when we take it off the animal. So I'll do a rough flesh on it, get all the fat and meat off that I can, ready for the salt. Then we salt it, and it's ready for the pickle. Goes into our pickle, our citric acid pickle. Formic acid is a good pickle if you can find it. We've used that forever and ever. But it'll go into the pickle, and then you're going to do all of your fleshing and thin it as good as you can. You want to get it as thin as you can without cutting hair roots.
Yep.
Is that good?
Yeah, and that's, so we thinned this one, you said 3 times, and then...
Probably 3 after the initial.
Yeah.
Yep.
And each time we put it back into the pickle, we'd go over it one time, put it back in the pickle, and allow it to swell up again. It'll take on some more moisture, and then we shave it again. They shave a little bit nicer, so you can do it all at once, but if you're finding that you're having trouble with thin spots, maybe put it back in the pickle,
and it does swell up, and you can do another nice fleshing. And don't forget the details. Don't forget these ear bases, which are going to allow you to do some really nice clay work and build up your ear butts. Around your antler burrs, like we talked about, make sure you get this real thin. That's so it doesn't draw away, and you have to patch it. Like I said, I used to have to patch all mine. I had extra capes that I could just cut out a little crescent and glue up in there. Nobody ever knew. And that was just bad taxidermy work. Long time ago,
That's
people.
Old taxidermy work, not bad.
And then be careful as you're fleshing, especially when you get on the machine. Try not to cut any of the hair along the incision. If you do cut hair along the incision, it's probably going to show. So we will take a scalpel and actually trim it. We're going to trim it a little bit. We're going to take maybe a 1/16 to 1/8 off of there anyway to give us a really nice sewing edge. But if you accidentally cut any hair, bump it against the wheel, we try to be real careful not to bump this into the wheel because it will cut hair. We're going to trim that back just a little bit. Not enough to lose any circumference in our neck, because every customer thinks he's got a Brahma bull, and they don't. You know, this leather, when it's properly thinned, properly tanned, will only stretch so far.
He'll go back to what he was, but
he won't go back to what is
not realistically
what his great Brahma bull uncle was. And some people want that. We'll get every inch back that he had, but we stopped there.
Yeah.
Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is do some repairs, correct?
Yeah, and this cape is a really
good example
good
for them.
Example of why they
example.
might need repairs.
Okay, you go ahead and show them what you will do.
Well, we have 2 holes here that are basically straight across from each other and in and out, possibly 2 ends, it almost looks like, with cut hair. We want to take that out the very best we can without changing the circumference of the neck any more than we have to. There might be a little bit of loss there, but so we'll do that, and there's going to be all kinds of different repairs. This happens to be a bullet hole repair. You could have a fighting scar. You could have your own cut. You might have the hunter maybe cut it in the field. But these are kind of bad ones, and we'll show you maybe a worst case scenario, and hopefully you won't have to deal with worse than that. But the first thing I think to do is we identify it here because it's easiest to see when there's no hair around it. They obviously show up, but we need to go to the other side and see how much damage there was, not just to the leather, but to the hair. And so we're going to face him this way and identify those 2. Kate, you might want to show them closer. Yeah, there we go. So as we stretch this out, we knew it was down toward the brisket. And that's going to be right here. There's one there. And there's one here. And both of those have cut hair. That looks like 2 ends, doesn't it?
A lot of burnt hair.
Yeah, a lot of burnt hair. So a couple things. We're going to have to take out all of this burned hair that's all broken. You can see deer hair and most other hair is multicolored. So the tip of the hair is different colored than the base. So with all of this hair, even though there's a base still there, no matter what we do to close that up, we're still going to have a line here where those little light colored tips don't cover the gray. So we have to remove all of this broken hair so that we can bring this good hair all the way over like that so that you won't see that. So that's our goal. Now to do it, we may have to get rid of, oh boy, there's probably a good 3/4 of an inch of leather underneath there. And what I like to do, because it's hard to see on this side what the shape is going to be, I like to take a little number 11 scalpel. I'll just use the handle first. And we're going to kind of put a couple little punches in the leather to identify the edge of the good hair. So pretty much everything on this side is good hair. We can see we've got good tips there. Everything on this side has burnt edges. So I'm just going to put a little poke through there, and I'm going to go around this hole in 3 or 4 strategic places to kind of establish a shape. Looks like I'm going to have to go clear to here. And then I'll come back here. Wow.
It's a big one.
Wow, it is a big one. And then I'm going to come back here.
Now this would be an example like when the customer brought it in. If it was thought enough for you to see that, you can you first of all warn him that this may not be a perfect fix because this is a major one. And second, you could, sell him a new cape also.
Yeah. So I'm going to just turn this inside out quick, and then we'll go back to the leather side. Here. And so right now, if you look, there we go. Thank you, Kate. Sorry about that. I moved. There we go. Okay. So if you look now, you can see we have this hole, but I've also got these little punches here and here and here. That this is the amount of area that we have to get rid of in order to get rid of all that burned hair. Now, if it were much bigger, we might decide not to take all of it and risk leaving a little bit of a line. That's kind of up to you too. Let me lay this out flat and show you what we've got. Now we're going to start removing some of this in hopes that we can get it brought back together. And would it help to illustrate it on the board? We're going to take this as a little bit of a horizontal cut rather than a vertical cut. Is that something you can show them easier on the board than I could do here?
I'm going to show it opened up. Yours is in a tube cut. Oh boy, my little marker isn't so good. Brand new marker. Hold on, you keep talking. I'm going to get a better marker.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove, I'm going to remove a little bit of space, and Tom's going to show you as he draws it on the board, a little bit about choosing the direction of the cut. If we were to pull this direction, north and south, from the ears to the brisket, you can see we can minimize this up and down, but we're going to have to take out a lot of width to close it up. By changing that and stretching it for width, we're going to be able to hopefully spare just a little bit of the girth, so we're not going to lose as much girth in the neck. So I am going to carefully lift this up and make a cut, and I'm going to have to cut the shape of a little bit of a football in order for us to close it. And I think Tom might have a better picture of it than
so I'll make a bigger one
here.
So what we got is we got a hole here, but because hair is flowing in that direction, all of this hair up here has been cut. And you can't put cut hair up next to good hair, which down here we have full length hair, because it's been cut off. It's going to look like a little barber scissors went through there. Plus, I think there's a blood stain on that, probably, that soaked into the edge of the hair. So what Brett's going to do, he made those little punches to where this cut hair stopped. So it was way up here. So he's got to remove all of that skin and all of that hair, probably as much as 3/4 of an inch above, almost an inch above that incision. Now you can't sew a round hole together because it's going to pucker and you're going to have big old puckers all over the place. So you have to make it into kind of a, I guess, an eye shape, pointed on the ends. So what Brett's doing is he's going to cut down here, and he can border that hole real close because there's no cut hair on the bottom. And by pointing it at the ends, like here, by pointing it and pointing it over here, that should be able to come together. And sometimes you'll have to trim it. You're going to want to have this skin really thin, this skin really thin, and no cut hair. If you leave any of this cut hair with the cape and don't remove it, you're going to have a, you can take a look at that too. What he's got there is kind of what I'm drawing here. If you have any cut hair, it's going to show.
There we go. That's what I've cut through so far. So you can see on both sides, and make sure you're not cutting hair. Do lift. Don't cut any good hair. And we would just have to go back, and I had already scored that, so I'm going to come in here, finish that cut. And then I'm going to come around the bottom and just clean this up.
Now some of you probably wonder why we're cutting across the animal like this when we probably could have taken out less skin by doing it up and down from head to toe. But by going from head to tail with our cut, you're going to lose the diameter of the neck.
Yep. Yep, and that's really important. So you can see here what I've got left. You can see all of this area that I cut out and all the bad hair that we got rid of. And as you come back here, you can see I've still got a little bit of this stained area right up here, but it looks like the tips of the hair are still complete. So I'm not going to worry about taking that out. And now we're going to bring that together like that, and hopefully with minimal pucker and minimal visible repair, we'll get that sewed together.
That's a biggie.
That is a biggie. It's an ugly one, but good to show them.
And there's a lot of different ways to do this. And rather than do it on your customer's deer before you start, practice on this. There's all kinds of hides that you can have available to you. You know, you might shoot a deer yourself. Don't be afraid to cut some hair on the show side of a practice cape and practice putting it together without having it show. There are times when you could take a section of the deer cape in another area, and we have patched in areas. We have made a nice little round patch, get the hair going in the same direction, and sew it in a hole that you can make fit, and you just put a nice little patch in there. That can work.
We've done that.
But make sure that your hair is going exactly the same direction, or it's going to be a colic. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But if at all possible, the way Brett's showing you here is what we would do for the minimal effort and the nicest look.
Yep. And in patching, hair same direction, same length, same color, same texture. It's color and texture.
I did a buffalo one time that had many spots to be patched, and buffalo hair is curly and goes in no direction, and I cut out perfect little circles. Some of them were as big as an apple because there are bad spots on it, and sewed them in, and on close inspection they looked pretty good, but when it was all done I could point them right out because I had twisted the patch different and I had to redo them.
Sure.
Okay, do you want to repair that, or do you want to show them on the other side and maybe brush it to see what they're going to get?
I can, yep.
And then I'll show them the tools that they can use to do this. Some people get extremely competent when it comes to repairs, and don't take repairs lightly. The person that can repair an instance like this better than your competition down the street is going to continually put out a better product.
Okay, so like you said,
Put you on the spot,
rather than going north and south, we went kind of east and west.
Now, by going north and south, or from head to tail, this deer is going to be about a 19-inch neck at most, maybe.
Yeah.
And say 19-inch neck going from head to tail, you probably would have reduced. This is a very big deer too. Yeah. You probably would have reduced that deer down to a 17-inch neck.
I'm quite sure we took out at least 2 inches. Yeah. So, and we sure wouldn't want to do that to our customers if we can avoid it. So the other good thing about the location of this is it might be, I see it's right at the front of the brisket, it might be kind of in that little
Belly.
shoulder area. So as I pulled the leather together,
And
this
that
will
looks
just
pretty
give you
good.
a little bit of a preview of what the sew is going to look like. Should close up about like that. We'll run a brush through it when it's all sewed up, and you know, if we get to something like that, I
could live with that.
I think our customer would be pretty happy knowing that he had a heck of a damage spot there, and it might tighten up just a little bit better.
And it
too.
is important to show your customers what they're dealing with when they bring their specimen in, or take pictures and, you know, message it to them or something. Here's what we're dealing with. I think I can fix it, but, you know, always leave a but, because you're not God. You can't grow new hair, and you will do the best you can with what you have to work with. There is a chance it's going to show. Always leave some doubt. I always maintain, leave some doubt in your customer's mind, because we think we're pretty good and we think we can do it, and 99 times out of 100 we can make it go away. That's a very big hole. That's a howitzer.
That's a big one. But do you want to tell them a little bit about threads and needles, and I'll start sewing, and maybe by the time you get done, I'll be halfway done.
Okay.
Okay.
When it comes to repairs, you're going to have to, first of all, look at what size of an incision you have to make, and what kind of leather you're dealing with. The leather that you're dealing with on the body is very heavy, and you can hide heavier thread. You can hide bigger needle holes. There's a lot of hair and fur, depends on what kind of animal you're working with, that can, you know, make your stitches go away. There are animals that you have to be very intricate and make really careful decisions on needles and thread. But to start with, I guess I would like to know what kind of thread I can put that together with. I'm going to show you a few of them here, and what's going to hide the best. I'll show you a few examples, and then we will settle on, you know, some of our favorites. One is cotton Dakron sewing thread, and this is like would be on a sewing machine or a serger, and this is very fine thread. We could sew up that incision greatly with this. I mean, it'd do a nice job with this, but look what happens when leather dries. It just snaps, and this thread is not adequate. I would use this on an eyelid or a nose tube, because you don't have the power on those thin areas. But where Brett's working on that heavy hide, even though we thin that on the machine a lot, this is gonna just break your thread. So this is out. Good for eyelids, ears. We use cotton thread for ears all the time. Then there is, this is a Dakron thread, and they use this a lot of times. I got this from a furrier, and they use it for sewing up hides that are going to be sold at market and things like this. And this is a nice white thin thread. However, I can really stretch it. Wow. Almost like a rubber band.
That's a lot of stretch.
Now, sewing up that heavy leather with something elastic like this, I'm afraid that when it gets stretched on a mannequin, glued and everything, the glue is going to allow it to slide. As that leather shrinks, this is going to stretch, and you might have stitches showing.
Yeah.
Oops, I'm sorry. Stop and
I
work
don't
here.
want to show them. I don't. It's a secret right now.
Secret. Okay, let's go to another one. Lot of taxidermists use fishing line. Fishing line's nice, strong stuff. If you don't have strong enough, get a higher poundage. But look at what happens with fishing line. Fishing line really stretches. This is like a rubber band. Reason is your fish thinks he can get away, but he really can't. But this is not a good choice for leather that has a lot of constricting abilities. Try not, if you're going to use fishing line, you could use lightweight fishing line on ears and lips and things like that, but more than likely the leather is going to be stronger than your elastic line. This stretches like a rubber band. Fish can't get away.
Now that's monofilament line, right?
Monofilament,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, we use this for years and years and years. This is actually Dakron Bowstring. There is no stretch to it. It's a great, used to be a great thread to sew. We sewed up every deer with this. It's a little on the heavy side. It's difficult to camouflage your seam, but it's not going to spread apart. There is no give in this. It's bowstring, but it's just a little bit on the heavy side.
And we would call that in the catalog cape thread?
Yeah, this would be cape thread, yep.
And still great for bison.
Oh yeah.
Some big heavy
Muskox bison,
maybe, yeah.
big brown bears. You'll never find this in the hair, and it'll give you a nice stitch. Our choice for several years now has been fire thread from the makers of, or made from Berkeley makes it. And this comes in every weight, even weight imaginable. I think you can get it from what, 4? Can you get it less than 4?
Yep, you can.
Maybe 2, 4, 6, 8 pound tests, and you will cut your fingers before you ever break this. It's extremely strong, but the diameter is such that you're not going to see it in the stitch or in the stitching. You're not going to find it. And we use probably exclusive this. It's black when it comes off the spool. It does fade to a gray, which is a kind of a perfect color for us. But fire thread comes in 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Big stuff, little stuff. If you've got 20, it's just a little bit too big for you, and you got 4, which is a little bit too lightweight for you, double it. We double our fire line all the time, and it works great. Excellent, excellent product.
I think we sell the 4 sizes, 4, 8, 14, and 20.
And by doubling it, you can go all the way from 40 all the way down to 8. Let's talk about needles. You're going to want to correlate the needle size with your poundage of your fire line. Needles are inexpensive, so when you go to order needles and you think you need a little one and you're looking at the catalog and you're kind of confused because, oh man, what do I do here? What do I want? They're cheap enough. Get a selection. Get a whole selection. That way you'll learn what the numbers mean. Usually the smaller the number, the larger diameter of the needle. The larger the number, the smaller diameter of the needle. And there's a whole big array of needles. We have straight needles that go from micro. This is not a little one. This is a medium one, all the way up to a big. And this would be like a number 4 size needle. And this I'm going to say is maybe a 12. And now these needles are 3-sided, and they have a cutting edge.
What's the difference from the 2 different listings of your straights?
Show me.
Glovers.
Oh, the Glovers and the regular.
surgical.
Glovers is more for a leather needle, like for Glovers, people that make gloves, and they're not stainless steel coated. A Glover's needle is more of a raw steel needle, and you'll take them out of the package and they're going to look like any other needle, but using them with a pickled hide or a tan hide, you'll notice first of all that they're much sharper than the surgical needles. There's 2 kinds, Glovers and surgical. They're much sharper than the surgical needles because they do not have that chrome coating. That chrome coating actually takes off the sharp edges. Glover's needles are extremely sharp. If your thread catches and you slide your fingers, these needles are 3-sided at the tip. Slide your fingers through, you will cut your fingers. Glover's needles are very strong, very sharp. They won't hold up to a pickle for long. By the time Brett sewed up this whole hide, maybe sewed up the back, that needle's already pretty corroded. Enough.
So the surgical needles aren't 3-sided?
Surgical needles are 3-sided, but they're chrome coated. and it's not chrome, but it's some alloy coated, to be used in hospitals. These will corrode, these won't. The Glover's needles, we have a whole listing of Glover's needles, are much nicer to work with. They're much sharper, much easier to work with. They will corrode and tarnish and dull quicker than your surgical needles.
They can be sharpened though on a little flat stone.
We do that all the time. We'll take hold them flat. They're on 3 sides, a little pyramid tip. We'll put them on a fine stone and wet stone, and we'll just work one side, turn to the other, work another side, and you can sharpen them considerably sharper than what they were when you got them. You probably took the chrome off, but they're still sharp. And most of the time, the smaller the needle, the bigger the number. So I'm going to say this is like a number 14. This is a number 2.
That would be the same with your wire.
Yep. And these come in straights. We use a lot of straights. For sewing up the back of a deer, I like to use this S needle, and these are called, it's a little bit more, but postmortem needle. These are what the
Autopsy?
Autopsy, yeah. The autopsy people use these, the postmortem needles. But these are good for sewing up deer because, you know, you can get a good grip on them. They're handy for getting a good grip. Don't worry about how long a needle is. Worry about how big a hole it's going to make. This needle could be a foot long and it'd scare everybody because it's so big, but the diameter is the same. This needle could be little bitty and think, oh, that's just perfect, but the diameter is way big. So that's what you're looking for, is the diameter. And most of these needles, the surgicals and the Glover's needles, are 3-sided. There's 3 very sharp, very flat sides, kind of a pyramid tip, and they cut. They actually cut through the leather, whereas a round needle, like you would get from like a sewing needle, which we use sometimes too. We use those on noses and ears, places like that. A round needle is difficult to punch through the leather like Brett's doing. Wow, you're a machine. And a 3-sided needle actually cuts its way right through. And if you're finding that you have to really maybe use a pliers with these, we have with students all the time. They will flesh the skin real good, and then they can't get it through, so they use a pliers. You don't want to use pliers. If you're using a pliers, your needle's dull or your skin's too thick. No, we want nice, thin skin, and we just want to use finger pressure to push it through. That's a straight needle. Larger the number, the smaller the needle, smaller the number, the longer the needle, the bigger the needle. We have S needles. These are called postmortem needles. I like these for sewing up the back of a cape because where the skin's a little thicker, you can get a hold of it with your hand real well. There's a huge array of different needles. There's lupits and there's all different kinds. The best thing to do would be buy a kit. A kit is $20 and you get like 15 different needles.
We're out of stock. Just buy one everything.
Oh. And but anyway, correlate the needle diameter with what you're sewing. If I was using this kind of thread, cape thread, I would choose a big needle that's going to make a decent sized hole to pull that through. If I was using Fireline, I would go with as small a needle as I can hold in my chubby little fingers. Whoa, look at you.
You did that fast. I was watching your hand.
That was real fast.
So there it is.
That's why he did it, I didn't. He's a fast seamstress.
So anytime we sew up a damage or even a seam or incision, we really haven't decided if we did a good job until we flip it over and comb it out. It's closed, but we do want to comb it out and see. Comb across here, I do see a little bit of discolored hair, but just a little bit.
That's pretty good.
I think that's for a hole that big on the side of the cape. I think it shows in the camera more than it should.
That was a pretty monster hole. That will look even better when it dries and the hair gets some loft in it.
Yeah. So this is what we ended up with. I didn't cut it off, just And there's all kinds of little stitches you can do. I just did kind of a quick running stitch right across there. Always check to make sure that it's nice and tight and you're not pulling your stitches
That
apart.
was pretty
That's
impressive.
what we got.
You could be on that TV show, Sewing with Mr. Singer.
But there we go. So that's kind of what you're after, and every deer is going to have something different. Every damage spot's going to be a different direction, a different cut. It might be short, it might be long. We've cut them twice as big as we have this one, but this was a pretty bad one, and you can see we can do a decent job of fixing those.
The best thing that you did is whenever you have a major cut like that, if you can cut it crossways to the neck, you're not going to lose your neck circumference. Your neck circumference for any deer is kind of important to the hunter, and that deer would have gone down to a 17-inch neck or smaller, and he would have looked like a doe with antlers. Whereas if you can cut it like that, it's much better.
There's another advantage too to cutting them crossways that might be easier to show on the board too. Do we have a marker?
I do.
When you make an incision, if our hair direction is going this direction down, and we make an incision this way, our hair is going this way, and when we pull this together, that's our little cut. When we pull it together, the hair is still running this way. Where if we go this way with our incision, our hair is going to cover that incision much better rather than wanting to part between the hair. So another advantage of going this direction like Tom illustrated here is that our hair is going to cover that. The one time you get into trouble with that is if this hair is longer or shorter than this hair. But in this case, it worked out pretty well for us because it covers that, lays over it pretty nice, and hopefully it won't
sometimes before, you had to take out a lot, and whenever I have to take out a lot, I start minimizing how much I take out. And yes, I have a little cut hair in there, but it's not going to show. It always shows.
It does.
And so try to get it all and get your hair coming together. Practice your stitching, because stitching is everything when it comes to taxidermy work, and repairs are ultra important, and you can't, you'll get better and better and better. Small stitches, like where you made that stitch, I'm going to say this would have done it, but it would have left a lump under the skin because it's so heavy. And some people use a lot heavier string than this, like almost twine, I would call it. But this would not be the best choice, like I showed you. This would work fine, but Brett would mount that deer, and because of the great stretch in this, there's a pretty good chance that it would look good for about 3 days, and then all of a sudden his incision or where he fixed it, his repair, is going to start looking like there's a fix-it there, and you're going to dig in there and you're going to see that the seam had stretched apart because of this. Stay away from anything stretchy, I would. And we get deer in all the time to redo, and people used whatever thread they had, and they break. We find a lot of them where they sewed up the back of that. We just had one the other day a while back. They sewed up the back of the neck, and there was broken thread all the way down. Fire line won't break. It's great stuff. Fire thread, it's great stuff. And you could double it. If you needed 40 on a buffalo, double it.
Yep.
It's really, really good stuff.
So we have a few questions. Well, we've got Miss Holly, who says, "Hi guys, excellent tutorial." And then we've got Paul Lambert, and Paul is saying, "What do you think about the way to Sally Dames used to fix the holes? You should put it on a mannequin and then pull it together with brads and brad nail, and then it was just about disappear."
I'm sure I've done that a lot of times.
Yeah.
Now they're talking about brad nails only?
I expect so, yeah.
And that just, the only thing with that is you lose your taxiability.
Yep.
You're not gonna, you might fix your hole right here. I'm kind of careless, so then I would decide that my brisket's way off center. So when I stretch my brisket back,
Yeah.
then my brad nails are starting to rip out. I've done that 1,000 times, and depending on the animal, you can make it work.
Yeah.
And with a long incision like you have, or repair, by fixing that and then taxing your skin more than once, we've busted our stitches open.
Sure.
By pulling it. So you're going to want to be careful, and you're going to want to realize that you have a repair there. Don't get real crazy with the hide stretchers and that sort of thing. Be gentle with it and let your glue taxi it.
Yeah.
By brad nailing it together, that repair is stuck in that spot, and if that's where that has to be, it's going to work great for you. I've done it 1,000 times. I would rather have it sewed.
Yeah, I agree. The one time I think that does seem to be a good tool to have in your bag is when we've gone through, we've mounted this deer, we've arranged all the skin, and it looks great, and there's one little cosmetic blem and that we just want to take out after it's mounted. We know everything's taxied right where we want it to be. Sometimes we'll go in and cut that little blem out, put a couple brads there while it dries, and that works pretty well too. But I think I agree with you answering the question. If there's any chance to sew it, I would much rather sew it ahead of time. And sew ahead of time rather than sew on the mannequin. I think we can do a neater stitch on the leather side than the hair side.
Sally Dames, that's an old book.
I know. That's a good one, though. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
That person's kind of dating himself. I used to memorize those.
All right, then we've got Matt Krallman, who's wondering, do you remove ear cartilage after tanning or before?
I would prefer before. It depends. If it goes to a commercial tannery, we leave the cartilage in to make sure they don't get ripped apart. Tanneries are notorious for, I don't want to say be careless, because I have a lot of tannery friends, but the system is a little harsher and not as kind to thin skin like ears. So we leave our cartilage in, going to the tannery, we take it out afterwards. When we're doing this, and we're going to tan this with True Bond or Liquid Tan, probably True Bond, and we don't have unlimited mounting time. So we need to get it mounted within a few days, and I don't want to spend time when I should be mounting it by taking ear cartilage out. So now it's safe to do, and you have all the time in the world. Nothing's going to happen. If I went home tonight and left that on the table and came in the morning, it's going to be every bit as good as it is now. Nothing is going wrong as long as that pickle is in there and doing its job. So I would take it out before.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking it out before just gives you so much more time. You can really work down the detail of the ear, and then we can go back and do all of our repairs. Not only taking it out takes time, but then oftentimes we have little repairs in the ears that we can do while it's pickled, and then we don't lose that mounting time.
Now in this pickled state, you can twink with that hide. I mean, like for competition purposes or something like that, where you really want to, split between the eyelashes and count eyelashes on each side and stuff. You really want to spend time and be meticulous. That is as safe as it will ever be. That's very, very safe.
Yep.
All right, then we've got Tim Calvert, and he's wondering, what is the best safety acid to use in a pickle, and what's the best tan to use also?
Any of our, their safety pickle and their safety acids all seem to work good in the right hands. Follow directions explicitly.
Yeah.
We like to use citric acid, which isn't a safety acid. It's a regular acid
Still
when
an
you
acid,
add water,
yeah.
but it's harmless when it's in the dry state. But a lot of people have great results with. There's safety pickle, there's safety acid. There's about 3 or 4 different kinds of safety acids, and they are all acidic, whether they're safety or not. They're still acidic. What was the last? He said one more question on there.
And
Best
then
tan.
he said, what is the best tan to use also?
We use liquid tan forever and with exceptional results. And when we became a distributor for True Bond is a great product and every bit as good or better than liquid tan. Works great. It's all, they're commercial tans put into bottled for the home tanner, I guess, if I had to say that. But we use True Bond in the shop now.
Yep. There's a lot of great tans, I think,
Yep.
if they follow the directions on them.
Paul
think that'd
Kales
be-
has a whole selection of,
Yeah. Tanning product, Crotan's
Yep.
a great tan. A lot of people, I think more than anything, it's more than the tan, it's your system. Yep. Yep.
and keep a good log. I learned how to tan the hard way, and I lost 1 out of 3 hides probably. I mean, I had a difficult time tanning. I went to Taxidermy Review, which was way before the World Show in 1892, I think. and the Jonas people were there, and they were tanning with some kind of a Jonas cream tan. And they said, oh yeah, you can do that. You buy one of those machines from him over there back then it was $900, was my fleshing machine. You buy that machine and you flesh them and you rub this on and mount them and you're good to go. And I was. My deer heads were like, she loves me not, she loves me, she loves me not. And it was a difficult learning experience. I learned the hard way, but I got mad and kept trying, and working the bugs out of my system. But tanning is not hard. You have to have your head on straight. Don't, go out and party and leave your hide laying in a pickle somewhere. Make sure that you follow directions and keep a good log. I love the hides that we tan. I think they're very supple. They're very elastic. We do not have major shrink, less than anything else. I think I'm insistent that the hides we tan on our own, our home tans are color fast. I have deer heads in my showroom, which now realize it's been many years. But what was that one girl, the Little House on the Prairie? She dropped some deer off that one time. But they have faded over time.
Yeah.
But I'm convinced that the hides we tan ourselves are milder. They don't go in a vat with a whole bunch of other hides. Tanneries have to have a little bit stronger chemicals because they would be out of business if one out of every few slip.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think ours are more color fast. I've always been convinced ours are more color fast. The browns stay browner, the whites stay whiter, the beiges stay beiger. And it's not hard, but come up with a system. Keep a very good regimented log. Right temperatures. Keep track of temperatures. Keep track of humidity. One of my first things that I ever did was when I was tanning my own deer, I was mounting them soppy wet. And I'd run a brush over them and groom them, and they were like a sponge or filled with water. And I'd hang them on the wall, and I was so proud of the deer that I just mounted. And, a week later, I would pull on him and, ooh, a little bit of hair and more hair and more hair. It's because he won't dry out for 2 weeks if you mount him sopping wet. We would mount him just like this. He's damp dry is what he is right now.
Yeah. Worth showing them too. We spent just as much time with this hide as you would a
Commercial
tanned hide. No epidermal damage, which is kind of nice too for you guys that are doing your finish work and minimizing finish work. It's always nice when we don't have epidermal damage, and that's
where all this epidermal is your first layer of skin here, and the colored area around that eye and tear duct and on the nose, a lot of times with a harsher tan, will start sloughing off, and you get little peelings of skin.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we've got another question. Rick Alsept wants to know, how long should you leave the hide in the pickle before you start fleshing it?
When we were teaching school, I would come in the morning and I would put a hide that I'd salted overnight in the pickle, plunge it up and down, and I would start fleshing 8 o'clock in the morning, so 2 hours at the most. And you'll notice that as you start fleshing, the thin areas, you can tell they're pickled because they're not a rare beef look. And as you get to a thicker spot, you're going to notice it's a little pinky, like rare. It will pickle going back into the pickle, and so you don't have to worry about it. But a few hours is plenty good to start, but you can leave it in many days, many days. And like I keep talking about the Aoudad that was in there for 7 years, that was a little overkill, and I wouldn't do that again. But I don't think you can find a slip spot on him anywhere, can you?
No.
That's just poor. It was my own. It wasn't a customer, so it's poor planning on my part. But,
they will be a little bit firm after salting. So if it's only been in there a couple hours, make sure that you don't have hard spots if you're going to go on the machine or detail work around the eyes. Make sure it is supple enough to lay out flat so you're not cutting holes.
And everybody, it's like baking a cake. Every single taxidermist out there has a different method. There are a lot of people that take a fox, for instance. They take the entire deceased fox and put him in a pickle. And Brian Hendricks insists, he takes all of his life-size animals, puts the whole carcass and everything in a pickle and skins them after that. It works for him. We typically skin them. He doesn't have to worry about hurrying to skin them because they're already pickled. We have to watch the clock as we're skinning an animal. So that's one method to do it. You can't argue with his results. His mammals are as good as they get.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's just a whole lot of ways to do it. So keep a log of what you did. If something goes wrong, call us or call somebody who does a lot of tanning, and they will steer you in the right direction. Tanning has to, once you come up with a system that works for you, tanning is a regiment you have to follow. If you deviate it from it, the results are going to change for you also. It's not hard, but you have to follow directions.
All right, and then Trace Life wants to know, do you ever pin your holes?
We have. There again, that would be like, we're talking about cutting them out on the animal. The other person was talking about that. The only time we do that, I think, is if a stitch would break open as we're mounting him, and we might pull it. This could come loose at the end, and all of a sudden we see hide paste coming out through the hair. And we might scooch it together once we got everything where we want it and pin it. We have pinned things on occasion out of necessity. Preferably, I like what Brett did here.
And then what kind of stitch do you use? David Schaefer would like to know.
What did you do?
I did just a round stitch or running stitch on this. I like it because it draws the leather together end to end. A baseball stitch, we've sewn miles of baseball stitches and they work fantastic. The one thing I have noticed is if you over tighten a baseball stitch, it can kind of, if you can pucker, imagine, it'll pucker just a little bit. And this I wanted to make sure laid nice and flat. So I just brought the leather together through a round stitch and let it run.
Whip stitch.
Yeah, yep, except rather than taking both stitches at once, I did one through and then out. And making sure stitching is an art. It really is stitching leather, where your needle goes in, where it comes out, making sure that you're not catching hair and so forth. And this is just a stitch we can do quickly. A lot of times we'll do this down the back of the neck
and practice with your stitching. Correlate the needle size with what you're sewing. If I'm going to be sewing a nostril, for instance, that skin is very, very thin. I'm probably not going to choose that great big S needle.
Yeah.
The holes are going to be, that this makes, are going to be bigger than the ones I'm trying to fix. I would probably take a small, and a lot of times in little intricate areas like that, we don't use a three-cornered needle like the glover's needles and like the surgical needles. We use a actual sewing needle and a beading needle. You can get beading needles at the different stores. A beading needle is an ultra thin needle, and it'll take you half a day to thread that little bugger, but by the time you get it threaded and fine thread, you can sew little intricate things to where I got to put glasses on to see if there is a stitch there. They're so nice. So certain areas, and ears are another thing. You don't want great big heavy thread on an ear repair because it's probably going to show and you're going to feel it, and the customer will dig in there and find it and notice that you are not a very good seamstress. But choose the right needle and thread combination for the job. Nothing like this for face or ears. This would work here, but it'd probably feel like a lump under the
an edge,
skin. Nothing beats fire thread. Have plenty on hand, and it's jet black to start with. It does fade out and turns to a gray, which is kind of a nice hiding color.
Okay, and then we've got a couple more questions. Jim Rex is wanting to know, do capes need to be shaved if done in an auto tan machine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
An auto tanner is an auto tanner, but it's not an auto flesher.
Right.
You do have to flesh them. And I would say most people unfamiliar with tanning and taxidermy, the secret to tanning is thinning the hide, and the secret to good taxidermy work is as thin as you can get without hitting hair roots.
Yeah.
We always say around here, thin to win, thin to win. By thinning this, I noticed Brett fleshed on this, and around these antler burrs, I like to put a little brad nails around the antler burrs to keep them from shrinking away if my stitches aren't quite good enough. These are so thin around here that I have no doubt that I can sew that up, and I'm not going to need a pin in that because he took the time to take a few swipes with his sharp knife around here. Another thing, your eyes have a huge muscle around the whole eye orbit. If that's not thinned really, really thin, that's going to pull, and it's going to pull your eyes away from your lens. So by thinning this whole area really thin, it's also going to help your antler burr, but it's going to keep your skin nice and tight to the eye. Tear ducts, you ever have tear ducts that pull out? You want this extremely thin, the tear duct sac, and you want a nice tear duct slot, but not too big.
Yep. They can flesh that eye apron as thin as they want to, but if they don't get that area around that muscle you mentioned, it's going to pull it right out.
Shrinking leather is some of the strongest stuff you'll ever
Yeah.
encounter. It can destroy them out.
Okay, and then Brian Brunson wants to know, I know it's ideal to get eye to nose measurement before caping, but if you get the hide already caped, can the measurement still be accurately taken?
If I had, what I'd like to, we have so many forms around, I guess, that what's really easy to do if you have any forms in your shop, even the wrong size form. Say I've got an 8-inch form laying around and I don't know if this is going to work or not, slide it on. If this is so tight that I can't get my eye pulled down to the eye hole and I can't get my lips around that are going to tuck, that 8 inches is, and I can't get the end of the nose off to the end, that 8 inches is too big. So I know that I got to go lower than that. So usually you don't have to be in this business very long before you have a few forms laying around, and all you have to do, or even buy a couple change out heads. If you bought a 7 3/4 inch change out head and a 7 1/4 change out head, you'll know too big, too small, go in the middle. You know, it's real easy to figure out what you need. If you have to overstretch things, taxidermy work goes downhill.
Yes, it does.
All right, and we've got a giveaway today. We are giving
yeah.
away fire thread.
Oh,
This is a great product, made by Berkeley. It's all we use. We use it on, I think, everything, don't we? We use it on
yeah.
birds, we use it on fish, we use it on,
Yep.
on our mammals and heads. Comes in quite a few different poundages. You will not break it. Even the fine stuff you won't break.
cut your fingers, but you won't break it.
If you're sewing up a buffalo, 20 pound is adequate to do that, but it's a little on the thin side. By doubling it, it's still pretty thin, but it's going to sew up a buffalo, brontosaurus, stegosaurus. I'd go with that,
was
20
back in
doubled.
your day.
Or, you know, you're sewing up ears. We use like a little 4 pound for ears.
Yeah.
Excellent, and it dries to a faint gray kind of.
Yep. Yep.
All right, and that winner goes to Fred Burtz, and Fred won this week's giveaway by sharing and liking last week's live video.
Good job,
So make
Fred.
sure
Thank
to-
you very much.
And then we've got
Perfect.
a couple announcements. So we've got this weekend the Mississippi and California taxidermy shows, and both of our professional and masters awards will be there. And then the World Show is less than 2 weeks away. If you're planning on being there, we've got doorbusters, 15% off our supply store and more. We've got live demos and giveaways galore. So if you weren't planning on coming to that and are going to be in the area, definitely check it out. It's going to be a pretty cool event.
Do make an effort to go to the World Show if you're serious about taxidermy, because
Absolutely.
the best supply companies in the world are there. The best taxidermists in the world are there. You can talk to these people and realize that, I mean, when I first started out and we had Taxidermy Review and I would see these big names, but they were like magical, you know, gods and goddesses, you know. You can go to the World Taxidermy Competition and you can actually sit and have a cup of coffee with any one of them and talk to them. They will answer any of your questions. They're not arrogant. They put their pants on just like you do, one leg at a time. And there's a wealth of information to learn at the World Taxidermy Show and Competition. There's seminars galore. You can pick what you want to see, everything from reptiles to, I
man,
can't
it's
even
all out
begin
there.
to tell. I mean, there's fish painters and there's game head mounters. There's a seminar for absolutely everybody.
Yeah.
And it's a great show. And
It is.
when
It
if you're going to come, kind of don't just stop in for the day. You know, plan on spending 2-3 days.
yeah.
I think it starts on Wednesday when it
Wednesday,
really
I think
starts,
so.
where everybody's setting up on Tuesday. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Saturday.
Yep. I think even Saturday. Yeah.
And all the vendors, there's going to be all the big names and supplies there.
Yeah.
Everybody is very happy to talk to you and show you the new things. And Larry and Kathy Bloomquist put on an exceptional convention for taxidermists. It's like we've been going for years and years, and anybody that attends the World Show and takes in the seminars and talks to the different vendors about their new products elevates their business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And that is in Springfield, Missouri.
Yep.
So, and then driftwood and form orders, we are out 7 to 8 business days. So we're making some headway with that.
catching up.
We're
Yeah, we
closing
were
in.
at
Yeah,
14 business days behind. For normal orders, we are 24 to 48 hours. So we're basically back to normal with our shipping time for our non-form and driftwood orders.
And that's not just because we're short-handed or behind. It's because it truly is because we have some of the best products you can get on the market, and they're in very high
Very
demand.
high demand, especially this time of year. Yep.
All right. So
Thank
I
you.
think that concludes everything.
Yeah.